Right, just before we crack on with this episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, KS Civils and Groundworks Limited, based in Leeds. They have over 296 years of combined experience in civil engineering and groundworks. Led by Director Carl Smith, their team is known for honesty, reliability and commitment to the highest safety and quality standards. They're proudly ISO accredited and fully CHAS Elite accredited. No matter the size of your project, KS Civils and Groundworks delivers professional, trustworthy service you can rely on. To learn more, visit kscivilsandgroundworks.co.uk. Now let's dive back into this episode. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I've got Rachel Webster with me. Rachel served with the Royal Military Police and later commissioned into the AGC SBS. Rachel served in Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, and did many, many years. And recently became prominent due to the lawfare and historical accusations against people in Iraq and Phil Shitter. And I won't correct that this time. Hello, Rachel. How are you doing?
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Looking forward to it.
No, brilliant. It's brilliant that you're here. It's the same questions I've got for you that I have for everybody else. So it's just, where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? What was it like? Why did you leave? And what have you done since? So if you just want to start off by giving us a bit of what it was like growing up and what made you join the army.
I grew up in a place called Brigg in North Lincolnshire, a very sort of small town. I wasn't very good at school in terms of probably academically and behavioural. And I remember at 15 being in the home economics class at school, and we were having to make, I don't know, like a Victoria sponge cake or something. And I looked across at my friend and I was like, is this it? And I was like, no, I want to go to the engineering class. So I kicked up a stink and went over to the engineering class, and there I really enjoyed it. And I remember throughout that last year at school, we had to make projects. And I had to make this engineering project, which was a toasting fork. And you had to obviously weld the fork and the handle together. And I queued up with the boys. And my school teacher said to me, I'll do yours. And I looked at him like, why? Well, you're a girl. Girls don't weld. And that in itself was then the catalyst for me to then go off and do an apprenticeship at British Steel, and I became the first female welder at British Steel in the early 80s. So yeah, it was an interesting.
The steelworks in Scunthorpe,
yeah, it was
that's
an interesting
a huge place.
Time. Yeah, it was. It was an interesting time, and I don't think anybody believed that I would do the full 4 years, not alone my own dad. But back then, in the early 90s, to be on the shop floor with the welders and the platers of that generation was a great training ground, dare I say, for my future career, especially as a young lance corporal in the military police, dealing with soldiers, drinking and fighting in Germany. So it was a good grounding.
I was going to ask that because the environment that you've gone into straight from school into your apprenticeship, it's going to be 99% male.
Yeah.
And let's say, late 80s, very different time to what it is now. Even though we don't think, like I said before we started, we're the same age. And I still feel that age. I still feel as though I've just left school.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, totally different. And you see things that are happening now, kind of, and the wokeism. Is it wokeism? It's just things have changed. People have changed. But then, the banter you would have got, you just wouldn't get away with it now.
No, you wouldn't.
No.
But it was, I remember one of my fondest memories was where I worked at the steelworks. I don't know whether I'll get anybody into trouble for this all these years later.
Just don't mention names.
It was a very long structural workshop, and the apprentices used to get a broom handle shoved through their overalls, and we were then hooked up onto a crane, and then we were shot down. The sort of the I don't know, the end of the oh gosh, I can't think of the word
The
of the
workshop type thing.
workshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, we shot down to the, and it was sort of like well, there was 4 bays, and it was who could get to the end the quickest and come back on a crane. So they did some terrible things to us as apprenticeships. But it was, I guess, the time, and I came away with an amazing qualification. Um, and that led into my journey into the army. But more importantly, for one, for some, I know there's conversations now against where people should have a degree or an apprenticeship. That apprenticeship for me was my savior, really, because I was mixing with the wrong crowd after school. And like I said, I wasn't very studious, and the apprenticeship gave me that sort of challenge and the study that I needed. And I wanted to prove everybody wrong. And that sort of became a mantra throughout my career, really. Don't tell me I can't, because I can. The school teacher telling me I couldn't weld and going against the norm, really. And then, as I progressed in my career, pushing boundaries with certain courses I went on. No, girls or women don't do that, So yeah, it had touch points throughout my military career, to be fair, because I did some welding in Iraq, I did some welding in Kenya, and not so much I didn't do anything in Afghanistan, but yeah, I did some structural welding in Iraq when I was refurbing a school, and when I was in Kenya, helping renovate one of the schools with welding the bed. So it did come in handy occasionally.
Bloody hell, I might have to invite you up here. I've got a 30-year-old camper van. It needs a lot of welding.
Yeah. So that was my stepping stone then into, I suppose, my military career, because once I'd finished the apprenticeship, some of my cohort went off to join the Royal Engineers, and they came back and said, "Oh, Royal Engineers is brilliant. We're in Germany. All this sort of stuff," and they're telling me about their adventures, and I thought, "Oh, that sounds so great," because now I've finished my apprenticeship. As a woman, I wasn't allowed out on the shop floor. I wasn't allowed out onto the furnaces because there was no toilets, things like that. So I was sort of ring fenced to, although I'd passed the apprenticeship, what the question was, what did they do with me now? I don't think they ever thought I'd stick the full 4 years, you see. Anyway, so I remember thinking, right, I might go off and join the Royal Engineers. And I went to the Army Careers Office, and there was this big old colour sergeant from the Coldstream Guards. I recall sitting in this chair, and I'd just finished my 62 shift, and I was all in my overalls, and all like face was all dirty. And I walked in and said, "I want to join the engineers," and he sort of like belly laughed and said, "Don't be so stupid, you can't do that. You're a girl." And that was that. I was like, right, okay, well, what can I do? And they showed me the video of the military police.
Did you know anything about the military police before that?
No, I didn't realise that nobody liked us.
I don't think it's a case of that nobody likes us.
Not until I got to Germany, but at that point I had to, I think one of the scariest points was going to Guildford to do my 8-week basic training there. That was quite an emotional moment in my career. On a serious note, back then, as we know, rightly so, rules have changed, things have progressed, but back in the late 80s, it was still illegal to be gay. Some of the instructors were obviously hiding their sexuality. So when they knew that we were military police, or we would be going to be military police, I wouldn't say we were picked on, but we were treated slightly more harshly than the rest of the cohort. And I was very grateful to leave there after the 8 weeks, if I'm honest. But then when I arrived at Chichester, I thought, oh God, I wish I was back in Guildford, because that wasn't very pleasant either. So yeah, it was an interesting time.
So the shock to the system then. I mean, it's funny you mentioned Chichester there. Round about the time you were there, I was at 47 Regiment at Thorney Island, just down the road.
Right, okay.
Right, and we used to take great delight, because when your guys got jailed for being shitheads or the locker was too bad, you didn't have a prison, you didn't have a guard room that you could jail them in. So they used to send them down to us. So they'd
Oh,
come to
I
us
was
for a
never that bad.
beasting.
I know.
We had a few in. And as soon as they come into the guardroom, and they just got basted for everyone that were in there. They got hammered, absolutely hammered. I mean, I've spoken to other guys who've been through Chichester, and the way it's been explained to me is that everything has to be exemplary. Nothing, you can't literally fuck about, really, because the RMP holds, their core values are so, they have to be higher than everybody else's. Otherwise.
Well, our core motto was, by example we lead, know.
So I mean, and in reality, they do have to be, because you can't, be telling, being instructing people and telling what to do and stuff like that if you weren't already there. And that the fact that you just come out of training with your first tape, I mean, that's fucking, that took me 10 years to get promoted, for fuck's sake.
But you have to have some form
of
authority.
Yeah.
But equally, when I look back, although some of the things were said and done, you had to have a little bit of a tough shell about you, because you're going out and dealing with, soldiers, and you could be dealing with any type of incident. When I was in Germany, whole range of things, and you've got to have the ability and skill set to communicate well and keep your head, so they want to push you, I guess, to see what you are capable of, and making sure that when you do leave, you are representing the Royal Military Police as best you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, it was, as much as we take the piss and stuff like that, and I'd take the piss there when we used to beast people and that, but it's quite a hard course. It's quite hard, like phase 2 to pass.
I remember the first person. Well, I won't say his name. He is a good friend. I was just left. Obviously, just arrived at Chichester. I think we're literally maybe just 10 minutes through the gate. And I remember there's this corporal there, immaculately dressed in all his blues and peak cap. And I was like that, looking up. And he caught me looking at him. And he's like, "What do you think you're looking at, split ass?" And I was like, holy shit. Because that was obviously a common name. We all got caught by then. And I was like petrified. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? And yeah, it was just, one of those sayings that we were called numerous times, but at that time we took it. The guys got called names, we got called names. It was just part of what I would say. What's the word? And it was just
it's a bit of banter.
It was banter, but no, it wasn't banter. It was to
the norm.
Yeah, to bring us.
Yeah, it was to bring you. Yeah, I know what you mean. It was to, I don't know, put you in your place. That's what I want of a better.
Good for the soul. Just. Yeah.
I mean, by Christ, you wouldn't get away with it now. We was.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, even the things at the steelworks. When I look back and think, that putting, broom handle through our overalls and throwing us on a crane down to the bottom of the hangar and back again. I mean, that would be totally against health and safety. But it was that time where you had you had a bit of humour. You had to.
Yeah, there was
no Facebook. There was no one to, there was none of you doom scrolling or on Instagram and laughing about other people doing those activities. Yeah. So I suppose people were just making their own entertainment.
Yeah. I mean, how did you find, because obviously when you're going through training at Chichester, there's quite a lot of like legalese you've got to learn and stuff like that. How did you find that side of it?
I found, well, there was lots of, I think also it's a lot of, you're explaining, demonstrating, imitating, practicing, and that's where, I shone really in that way. I still struggle with the, the written word sometimes, but, you have mechanisms in place to get you through that. And, I did my education like many of us in the military. I was identified as being dyslexic. Going through some of my courses that you go through, and then you put in interventions in place in order for you to be able to work through that.
Yeah. I mean, well, recently I found that I'm dyslexic, which explains a lot, really.
Yeah.
And the courses, the recent courses I've been on, you get offered the help and everything. And I managed to do it without actually, asking for help with it. But yeah, it's for years I thought, what in fact, I didn't even think about it. I mean, I just thought that's the way it is. But now I understand that I couldn't get, or I did certain things because of other issues, type of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, without going too deep in it, it's not my story. It's yours. Yeah. No, I'll take over. Right. Anyway, I was going to say no. We'll carry on with yours. So what was it like leaving phase two? It wasn't even called phase two then, was it?
Gosh, no. Well, it was just your basic training.
Yeah.
But we were still, at that point, in 89, we were still classed as WRC attached to the provost as it was.
Yeah.
So we didn't have the RMP cap badge until 1992 when the WRC was disbanded.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so as a female, we got paid back then. We got paid less money. We did get what was classed as a hosiery allowance.
I knew that, but I didn't know you got paid less. So I knew you got.
Which didn't last long. Whoever must have put that grant in had no idea how much a pair of tights cost from Marks and Spencers. And then it wasn't until 1992. So we didn't get the salaries then became the same. But for 3 years, I would have that first 3 years of my career. For me to get my corporal's course, I would have to go to Guildford, do the WREC corporal's course, and then come back and then go on to the RMP corporal's course. So we had to do 2 for 1 sort of thing until we were all cap badged the same.
That's a bit shit, isn't it?
I know it was, yeah, because if you can imagine going then back to Guildford as a Lance Corporal, WREC attached Pavot, it didn't go down very well, with some of the instructors there, unfortunately. But that was that era, that time, and you really had to fight to pass it as well. There were any opportunity probably to failure, because they knew that if you failed that, you wouldn't get them promoted. You wouldn't go on your corporal's course back with the RMP.
That's crap. I mean, you think about it. You've gone on the course, you've qualified, and then you've got to go and qualify again.
Yeah.
It's fucking beggars belief. I mean, that bit about you saying, getting paid less.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I wonder if that was the same in like the Royal Signals.
It was what was classed as the X Factor, because at that point we didn't deploy forward, did we?
Yeah.
In Germany, for example, we were classed as rear echelon. We were at Rheindahlen, RCZ, whatever it was. And then, that's why a lot of the soldiers or infantry lads would come down to Rheindahlen on a weekend, because that's where all the girls were.
Not guilty of that.
Always caused lots of, fights and all the other nonsense that goes with soldiers and drink and women.
I mean, especially if your first posting was BOR then.
Yeah, Rheindahlen, HQ.
That would have been a bit of an eye-opener for you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember, the nightclub Queensway and the Bop and the stuff, and 24-hour discos where nightclubs were open 24 hours, and the German nightlife, was just crazy compared to what I'd been used to in Scunthorpe.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you got these tech discos and everything's staying open till 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, wow. But yeah, it was interesting. As a young Lance Corporal arriving in Germany, getting to understand the what it was like to go out on patrol and police car and all that sort of stuff. And it was before the days of computers and things. So, if a soldier was arrested or was any misdemeanors going on or any incident, you would have to write it on a signal pad. And then that signal would then get taken to the comm centre and then promulgated that way. It was strange when you look back. That daily occurrence book was the Bible, basically, where everything was logged.
God, I forgot. You know what? I forgot all about that. The daily occurrence book. You know, every time you went on duty, we're like fucking going back through the page and see what had been happening. I'd imagine the RMPs.
And then like walking with it petrified into the RSM's office in the Monday morning.
Making sure you hadn't made a mistake and there's no
Yeah.
Tipex in there and that. But no, you'd have a good dig through there to see what some people had been up to. And then you'd see who the dicks were who'd write it all in as well. You know, he did this, blah, blah, blah. Get him in the shit, man.
Oh, dear.
But I mean, what was it like going out on your first type of patrols and that and dealing with drunken people like me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was back in the day as well where you could have a little bit of leniency as well, you know, and if you got partnered with a senior corporal, you know, who knew what he was doing, and especially what I would class as the VTs, the lads voluntary, you know, who transferred from a regiment into the military police, who were a bit more worldly wise and all that sort of stuff. It was great just to watch and learn, basically. But I had good banter back then because I'd had 4 years on the shop floor with a load of welders and platers, and if I hadn't held my own during that 4 years, I wouldn't have survived. But maybe I was a little bit too cheeky, you know. But that's it. I mean, I suppose I was a bit like Marmite for people, and I think that's that's throughout my career. You know, people either liked me or didn't. You know, there was 2 camps. Which one are you in? But I think that goes for most of us. Yeah.
Do you remember your first arrest?
Do you know what? I only arrested one person, and I think that was when I was a sergeant. I was really lucky. Whoever I was out on patrol with, they would do the paperwork and do the arrest. I didn't do it on purpose, but I think we were, like I say, going back, we were a bit lenient. We had that degree of leniency where, you know what, if you caught 2 guys having a little bit of a scuffle, and they were especially if they were from the same regiment, you'd be like, come on, guys. And then you would either drop them off at the guard room where they would get into more bother than if we did lengthy paperwork. So, you know, you had a bit of a discretion to be able to do that to a degree, as long as they hadn't like took chunks out of each other. But yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, no, shall I admit this? Yeah, go on then. The last time, I wouldn't say it's the first time because there might have been a few other occasions. Remember, I got out the army as a full screw.
Do I need to write a notebook? Do I need to be writing this down?
No, actually, it's quite. It puts the RMP in good light, actually.
Right.
So I may have been a little bit drunk on a Sunday afternoon once in Hona, and decided to go for a walk to another pub, and I couldn't fucking walk. I was leathered, and my mate was with us, and I tripped over and fell on some bushes. So the GCP came over to see if I was all right.
All right.
I come screaming out of the bushes, calling them Nazis and all sorts.
Oh dear!
They pinned me to the floor. They had to go back to the car to get straps for my legs because the ones they had weren't big enough. And then they held me there. They were like, "We don't know what to do with him." And my mate's like, well, "What's happening?" He goes, "Well, he hasn't broke the law or anything, so we don't know what to do with him. We can't let him go though." So they called the RMP. They took us back to the police station, the German one. And the RMP lads turned up and they went, "Oh, what are we going to do with him?" And they said, "Well, we don't know." And they just went, we don't want him. Has he broke the law? No, we don't want him. In the end, they convinced the RMP lads to take us away.
Yeah.
And just locked me up in a guard room for a couple of hours, which was cool.
I think the only time when soldiers are really pleased to see you is when they've been arrested by the German police and you're picking them up from the cells. I mean, they were literally would be handcuffed to the the floor, and then they'll be like, "I want to make a complaint about the German police," and you'd be like, "Good luck with that one. That ain't gonna happen, is it?" But no, so it was a mixture of all sorts. You would get at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember getting calls. You would hear the interpreter's phone go, and you're like, "Oh no." You know, because that would mean it's the German police ringing up to say somebody's done something. Yeah. And then, they would come in and go, they'd relay what had happened. You're like, what has he done? What have they done? I mean, like taking tanks out in the middle of the night for a drive and stuff and getting caught drink driving with a tank. And you're like, how am I supposed to write that up? Like, please, come on. I mean, what is this? Oh yeah, what you used to think, what on earth possesses them to think that it's a good idea at like 2 o'clock in the morning to go and take a warrior out for a drive?
I'm sorry you're thinking, that's fucking cracking. I mean,
That wasn't JHQ. That was
Yeah.
up in Fallenbostel. That one. That was years later. But yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're
So
making...
it was an interesting time, and then
Yeah.
I went off to do other things. Whilst I was in Germany, worked with the drugs intelligence team whilst I was out there for a year. That was really interesting. And then that posting came to an end. And it was around the time I think Gulf War One, yeah, 1991.
Yeah.
Got posted then to Northern Ireland, and then off I went to other places and everything. So Northern Ireland was good.
The drugs intelligence unit, back in the day, before the times of CDT, I mean, it was... I wouldn't say it was rife, but it fucking was.
Yeah.
But it was nothing hard. The only thing I ever seen or come across was a bit of marijuana and stuff like that. And everybody kind of knew who was on it, and as long as they didn't fuck up, nobody was bothered. We'd get a warning that the RMPs were coming in the block with the sniffer dogs, and everyone would throw pepper in the bottom of the lockers and stuff like that, just to fuck the dogs up. And apparently it really does fuck the dogs up as well.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's not, not something I'm proud of.
But I think it was of that era then, wasn't it? The acid generation started, didn't it? With the tech music and all that sort of stuff.
Things changed.
Yeah, the things were starting to change. Yeah.
And as much as us looking back, I say, I mean, I've never been involved with drugs or anything, and we say, the army's all against drugs and everything like that, but they're just normal people.
Well, it's a cross section of society, isn't it? And that's what we've found recently. As we go through.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Collie, I've been AWOL, so I got court martial and went to jail. I remember we were sat there, and it was a Saturday morning, and there was just from the gate come down, there was like 3 ranks and about 20 odd people just marching down, all at RHF, and they'd all been banged up for 28 days for drugs. And it was just like, what the fuck's going on? Because actually at the time, nobody else who was in the nick with us were in for drugs. We were all in for like fighting, AWOL, fucking misdemeanors, telling people to do one or whatever. There was nothing, but there was no drugs. They were all in D-wing. But this lot, they'd all been given 28 days and a lot of soldier on. And it was just like, what the fuck's going on? It was just a bit weird. I mean, we'll jump forward to Northern Ireland. It must have been quite a strange and interesting place for yourself to go. I mean, I've heard you mention something on another podcast that I wasn't aware of, and I really didn't know this, that you weren't supposed to carry arms.
Not overtly, not until 1992, 93. I think it was. I can't remember. So I first was deployed down. So I was part of what was called the Recognition Information Section, which we dealt with all the montages and the collation of data, let's say. I don't know how much we should say, given the fact that the immunity bill has just been signed. But yeah, so I was part of like a what was called the RIS cell. And from there, I went to be a CONCO, a continuity NCO, which I'm sure most of your listeners will know what that is. But for those that don't, it was like the guys would come in on 6-month Roman battalion tours, and CONCO would be there as exactly that, the continuity between when they first arrived to when they left, so that there would always be somebody who'd be able to do the briefings and tell people where X and Y lived, etc., and knew the sort of the town, knew key personalities and all that sort of stuff. And I was one of the first females to do that down in Auchnachoy. And the first unit I had, I think, was 2 Royal Anglicans, actually. And I remember I had the pistol, but I had authority to wear it, but covertly.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't, and I think then within a few months after me been there, I was allowed to then overtly carry. because the rules changed.
I imagine the Congo job being quite interesting.
It was interesting. Again, difficult time because, again, being a female, oh, why are we listening to her? She doesn't know anything. And, I'd been in Northern Ireland at that time over a year, and I'd built up a very strong knowledge of majority of the of was it 39 Brigade? Was it 39 Brigade? Where, from Armagh to Crossmaglen to Coal Island, Cookstown, all around there, all the key personalities. So when an opportunity came, I asked my OC if I could be put forward for it, and we were very forward thinking in the military police. At that point, a lot of corps were getting their first females coming in, for example, the Royal Engineers, etc. We'd already had established females in the military police for a long time. So there wasn't, people would look down on you and go, you can't do that. If you had the capabilities, you were fit, you could shoot well, and you had all the right attributes, you were given the opportunity as well as anybody else. And I was supported through my own peer group with the guys. Let's give Rachel an opportunity to do it. So I went down to Orkney. I was down there for nearly a year, on and off. And it was, let's say it was when you got the infantry units coming in and they weren't expecting a female, and then you're there doing a briefing and they're looking down on they're not even taking any notes, and you're giving them a rundown of their area of responsibility, but also where they'll be patrolling that evening. And I remember the old Rucklow, the IUC liaison officer, saying to me, like, Rachel, get out a minute. And he, I'd go outside, and he then just ripped into him and said, look, Rachel's been here for nearly 6 months. She knows what she's doing. Flipping, listen to her, because she ultimately knows the area. And I come back in, and then they've all got the notebooks out, they're all writing. I think because they were scared of the Rucklow. I mean, he was a big old guy. But ultimately, put on the sift, the white sifter I used to get given, which was a big old flipping.
It was heavy.
It was heavy, but I do that without hesitation. I would normally ask, and the guys would be like, "Are you sure?" Yeah, and I'd go out and do a patrol, and then and after that, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, you're all right, you are," and then that was okay. But I think that was it. It was like proving yourself that you were not going to be a liability for them, and more of a support for them was the key. And I remember going out doing hard targeting around Coal Island with the paras. that was interesting. But get a slap on the back by the sergeant when we came back in. You're all right for a bird, and that to me was like, thanks very much. I'll take that. Because and again, going back or going forward in this wokey business, there wasn't room for any of that. You wouldn't have got where you got if you were like, you can't talk to me like that. If anything, I think I was quite, because of where I'd come from at the steelworks, I was probably more forward thinking and male thought than I was probably female at that point.
I mean, you've gone through, like you say, you've gone through your apprenticeship, so you've experienced it. You've saved your time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to give it back and stuff like that. I mean, I would have found that your time in Ireland, you'd have been quite in demand for, like, the female searches and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a female search platoon up in Lisbon, and then in Armagh we had a series of females was down in Besbrook, down in Crossmaglen. We were pretty much everywhere. There was no. But I'd say I had that opportunity to do the Conco piece for nearly a year. And it was really eye-opening, really, the opportunities that I had to speak to certain key people who were, the bad guys, let's say. Reports that we used to generate, the chat-ups that we used to do. And where Orkney had the vehicle checkpoint search
Yeah.
Can't think of the full name of it at that point. So we would get key people coming in who the special branch lads or the SF lads were wanting to talk to, and their cars would be literally stripped to the sachet, literally just the four wheels left and the steering wheel. And one of the jobs that I would have would be talking to those guys for maybe 4 hours while that was going on. So it was interesting, and then I would write a report of what said, and then it would go to wherever it went. And then after that year, I went then back. I got extended, and I went back into the RIS cell dealing with videos and other bits and pieces. So it was a really great time, and I think that's when I realised I wanted to stay in the military, and I would make a career of it.
I mean, that bit where you're talking about you're interviewing these guys for like 4 or 5 hours while they're getting the car searched and all that. How did you find them? I won't call them the enemy. I'm especially today of all days, the 12th of February, is the day that Stephen Restrick was killed. He was a good mate of mine, and we were on that tour. We were in Besbrook when that happened.
Wow.
And him, his murderer, was given 18 months. He was given life, but let out after 18 months because of the Good Friday Agreement. It's kind of a bit of a pill for people like me and a lot of others I know, but we wouldn't want to go back to as it was. To say that some people found that the IRA guys that they came across were quite professional. Some of them weren't. Some of them are just fucking gangsters. That's what most of it was about. It was about power and controlling the drugs trades and stuff like that. People don't forget that side of it. But how did you find these people? When you were talking to them, were they nonchalant, were they arseholes?
Well, I'd got a bit of banter going with a few of them because they used to go backwards and forwards to Monaghan through Otnacloy checkpoint. And I was there when Ballygawley police station was blown up, and I think 8 mortars didn't go off, and I recall the mortars, the welding had split. So I would have a bit of banter.
I know where you're going now.
I would have a bit of banter with him about, you need to sort out whoever's doing your welding because rubbish. And, what do you know about welding? And then I'll be like, well, actually, I can do TIG, MIG, submerged art, electric slag. If you want me to give you some ideas and pointers of what you went wrong, I'm more than happy to show you that. And then also, because I'd been in the RIS cell previously, I knew background of them. Like some of them had, dare I say, their front would be a window cleaner, for example.
Yeah.
So, one would come in and be chatting to them, and he'd be like, "How's the window cleaning business going?" And he'd be like raising his eyebrows. "How do you know about that?" "Oh, I know about that, and I know about your name, and I know this, and I know that." And then they'll be sitting there, right? Okay, then what do you want to know? And it would be, an interesting sort of conversation because you didn't really know what they were telling you could be true or not, but you would write it all down, and then subsequently you would find out that actually some things were very true, what they'd then given you information on. So yeah, it was a sort of because I'd had life experiences, I was able to have that chat, and just as what we're doing now, just how's your day been? It was all right until I got arrested, and then well, part of the process, and then so what else have you been up to? And just an organic chit chat, really. Have a coffee, cigarette, whatever, and
get relaxed and see what they come out with.
And then on men, you like to talk.
Yeah.
As women like to talk, but men like to talk equally. So yeah, interesting times.
So what was in store for you after Ireland then?
Where did I go then? Ireland. I keep forget where I went. I think I went to the UK for a brief period. London, the Criminal Central Records Office. So again, we're talking before computers, aren't we?
Yeah.
So that was a deployment where literally it was more staff bound. You would get calls from the police saying soldier had been found arrested, and you would be the interface of tasking a unit to go and collect him, or AWOL or things like that. So I did that. I then went off and did some courses that I wanted to do, and to improve my sort of career. And then went back to Chichester, got promoted to, so I was a corporal all this time. Then I went back to Germany. Must be getting up to 1996, because then I went to Bosnia.
Yeah.
Then Iraq, then Bosnia, then Kosovo, then back to Germany, Kosovo, Northern Ireland, and then 2003. So, and then back to Germany again. That was my thing, mainly Germany, Ireland, back to Germany, and then Iraq was bubbling in the 2003.
Yeah.
And then after that, transferred after, when I came back from Iraq 2003, went to the AGC SBS, and then commission. Ended up serving with 2 Engineer Regiment, which was quite good.
Yeah, do any welding?
No, I didn't do any welding, but it was funny because it was because of 2 Engineer Regiment. Really, I got my LE commission because I went there as a chief clerk, and because I'd got all my career courses, let's say, like, you know, the drill, the weapons, LFTT. I'd gone off and done that. I'd done my close protection course. I were drill. Let's not even talk about that one. That was horrible, because I was supposed to go I was identified to go to Sanders as an instructor, so I passed the pre-carder, and then Iraq was bubbling, so didn't go on the cardo and opted to go to Iraq.
So what was that like for you? So that was Optelic 2003.
That was Telic 1, yeah.
I mean, you know, I was with 3 Hour Cheer. We were there. What did you think of it?
Well, initially it was great, wasn't it? I mean, we went over the border. People seemed to be happy with us. People weren't happy with us in the UK. Stopped the war. We stopped the war too early. Stabilisation phase wasn't ready. Caused all the unrest that things weren't dealt with properly. Disillusioned. Yeah.
I always
mixed bag, really.
I'll put it this way. I mean, because we were in Germany then, so we didn't, as a whole, we didn't, you didn't fucking take any note what was happening in the UK because you were in Germany, pissed all the time. It was great. So we didn't really experience the stop the war side of it, and all. But
it was on the news, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I remember.
Again, we had BFPS. You didn't really watch it. So.
Yeah, I suppose it was in Basra, and I remember it going through. It was on the sort of Sky News when we were in Basra, and you were seeing all these people protesting outside Parliament, like stop the war, and we'd only been at war at that point, over literally a week or 2 weeks or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah. I don't know, can't remember the full dates now, which was really sad to see, because I've spoke about this previously, when I look back on all the deployments that we've been on, like from Bosnia to Kosovo, like probably yourself, and you look at and you think, Kosovo, I know we've jumping around here, but Kosovo was a very, very hard deployment for a lot of people. I was embedded with the Green Howards in a place called Obelich. It was horrendous, the stuff that we saw and did. And you look back and where you think about the things that we were dealing with and the intensity, I don't think there's been one case of misdoing or lawfare of what I'm aware of. And then, because you look and you think, well, who was in charge at that time? General Jackson. You look at the planning, the length of the stabilisation phase that we had. We knew when we went over the border what everybody was doing, where everybody was going. The temporary police stations, the temporary judicial system, everything was in place. And therefore we had a successful transition into what we would class as that next phase. And then you look at what happened in Iraq, the pressure that the government was on. They didn't listen to, probably, I'm guessing, the generals at the time. And we were then left in this void of well, what are we? We're not ready for that next phase. We don't have a police stations properly set up. We don't have a judicial system. We don't have anything. So, what do we do now? We're not, at least when we were still at war, we were able to arrest somebody for a misdoing. We were able to process them and send them down to Qasar for the next stages of process. But you took away that phase. We were left in this uncertainty. Nobody knew what to do or how to do it, and it was extremely difficult to police. And that is currently what the more topical piece of where we're at now, where things maybe did go wrong, but there was a lot of things that went right. And I'm not saying that nobody should be everybody should be investigated if they've done wrong, but going back to where we're at now is, I've said it before, you don't knock an orchard of the ripest fruit to get a few bad apples, and that's what's currently happened to me. Happened to me.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry, I'm really waffling on now.
No,
Apologise to all the listeners.
It's
They
fine.
probably haven't got a clue what I'm talking about.
No, but we'll come on to that in a bit, and then they will understand, And going back to Kosovo, I was lucky enough. I would say twice in my career I was being lucky. One, I didn't go to Kosovo, and I never went to Afghan, and I consider myself lucky for that. And I'm guilty of not understanding what Kosovo was because I was on an ARE post and I never went. I've been to Bosnia twice. First time I went to Bosnia was in 95. Second time was in 97, around about the time that you went. The first tour I did Bosnia is probably the one that it's out of all my time in the army, that's the one that kind of affects me. And it's not from what I've seen. It's from what I've seen, the aftermath of it, and knowing what had happened, and not being able to do anything about it. As UN, fucking useless, really. And towards the end of our tour in 95 is when we changed from UN to bright blueberries off, normal berries on.
Yeah.
Artillery, we're going to fucking hit you. And we did. And, the data agreement and everything like that. And the Serbs went, no. Oh, shit, they're killing us. Sorry, we won't do it again. That type of thing. So I always thought Kosovo was like Bosnia. Same type of thing. And it's not until I've interviewed guys who've been there. And I've just recently interviewed ex-IUC guy who was out there. When he was in the IUC, he was out there doing this to the police, and I thought, oh, you're just doing peacekeeping. And he was like, no, we were the police. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And he told me the story of that, and it was fucking, it was lawless, Kosovo. It was hard work for, and I spoke to the guys who served there, and again, being guilty of thinking, oh, it's just been a Bosnia tour. And, for a lot of people go on tours and they do, nothing happens to them. Nothing, they don't, they're there to do a job and nothing happens. Where other people, right, I'm not saying they're up the front and they're going to get it, because sometimes that doesn't happen either. But a lot of people suffered from Kosovo, in later years, because it was horrendous.
It was, yeah. Physically, mentally, probably the hardest 4 months of my life, really, when we went over that border. And I was the lone police woman in Obelich, like we say, with the Green Howards. And it was a hard time, Obelich. There was, you had that balance where, there was the Serbian and the Albanian community. And we all know not all the Serbians were bad, not all the Albanians were bad. And then you mixed up with all the gypsies. And, I remember, I think the first day when my police station went live, must have had a queue all the way around the block. We were living in what was the old Serbian police station, and a little office, and people were reporting their house has been burnt down, rapes, murder, mass graves, their cattle been killed, and I logged absolutely everything. And as the days went by, I would go out. I overcommitted really. Every more or less every patrol that the guys were on, I would go out with, and it wasn't. It was anything. It wasn't anything but more for supporting them and making sure that what was going on was accounted properly. Not me checking on them. It was a mutual effort. And I was invested in that community. I dealt with numerous young girls who had been raped. Mass graves we uncovered. I think it was also like you realised the depths of how evil some people are. I've not physically seen some of the things that we saw. A young girl being uncovered, in a grave. I remember like locals coming in saying, "Oh, there's a mass grave," and be like, "Well, how do you know?" Because we can smell it, and you're like, "You can't." And it wasn't until a few weeks in, and you actually could start smelling that death smell. And sometimes, still, you're back in that environment, and you go, that smell.
It's a smell that never goes away.
Yeah, and dealing with the young girls that were raped was the hardest thing for me. I remember getting additional requests because I got on very well with the KLA commander. Initially, tried to run an illegal police station, which I shut down. And then basically said to him, "There's only one sheriff in this village, and it's me." And I ended up becoming really good friends with him as best you could as a KLA commander. And he introduced me to some girls who had been subjected to the most horrendous treatment by the Serbs. And I had to explain to them through, obviously, an interpreter, the need for them to take statements. They didn't understand about the process of evidence. And, these young girls were able to describe these Serbians to the actual details of their teeth and their smell. And actually, we made really great progress and identified two of the Serbians that were still living in Obilic, and we were able to get them arrested. And then the international police came and took them away, basically, and the evidence, and that had gone to the Hague Tribunal. So there's an article about me on that. I think the Times run an article on that about Corporal Wynn's trust of raped Muslims back in '99. Yeah,
Make a note of that.
Yeah. And so yeah, and good old army fashion. As soon as I finished that deployment, because we were, as what with like any corps, you get moved around individually. I went back to Osnabrück and then was posted straight away to Northern Ireland, and it affected me a little bit when I first arrived there because nobody else had been to Kosovo, so I had no one to have a talk with and not de-stress, but I don't know, just chat with.
Just decompress about it. Yeah,
decompress is the word. Yeah, and it was probably the first time where I thought I might need to speak to somebody, but it was still a bit of a stigma because you didn't have like mental health, you didn't have, I don't know what's the buzzword for it now, but
mental
it was
well-being, wellness.
Yeah, it was like psychiatrist, and it was a scary word, and so yeah, you just didn't talk. Or I remember ringing up other people and talking to some of my friends, but yeah, it was hard, and I felt guilty of leaving them. But it's one of my things that I would like to go back and visit Obilic again now as I've got older, just to see what it's all like. But yeah, it had a profound impact on me, and I think that was probably from there. I was still a corporal at the time, got posted in Northern Ireland, and then got promoted on the back of the work that I'd done out in Kosovo, and then decided then because I got promoted, I'd only been in Ireland the second time. I was in Lisbon for about 6 months, and then got posted back to Germany, and then started doing the Sanders sort of courses, and then that aligned to then Iraq happening in the 2003.
I mean, we'll go back to Iraq. And we touched on it earlier, and the way I see it is Whether it was an illegal war, an unjust war, an unneeded war, I don't care. Right? I'd been in the army for 10 years. Right? I was in the first Gulf. I'd been to Ireland, I'd been to Bosnia. And for a lot of the lads who were serving then, I was a fair bit older than them. This was their first big gig. And to say we were looking forward to it is kind of a misnomer, really. It's like people, we're going to war. We're not going onto a tour to Bosnia, or we're not going to walk on the streets of Ireland. We're going to war. We're taking the guns. We're going to war. We're doing this for real. And it was a case of hurry up and wait. I was one of the first deployed out there, waiting for the vehicles to turn up. I mean, that was an interesting day when it turned up. We just ran into the boat, jumped into vehicles and drove into an old area.
Yeah.
No, what's that? I don't know. Just get in and drive it. I haven't got a license. Doesn't matter. Just get it off. It was fucking great. No commanders.
Even just getting the vehicles out there, wasn't it? I remember driving to the ports in Hamburg. Was it Hamburg or wherever we went to? I can't remember where we were in Germany, where we drove them to, but we drove them to somewhere. Yeah,
it was mad. I mean, we got all the vehicles off and then out into the desert, and we're like, right, we're ready to go. Where's everybody else? Everybody else turns up. Wait, oh fucking hell! And we just don't hang around. And again, I've mentioned it many times on this podcast that we deployed to our old areas, so we knew something was going to happen. And then we seen the UN driving down the road away from the border, and we thought, fuck, we're going in. And that night we went in. And the way I see it is, yes, anyone can have an opinion on that war, but we were there to do a job, and we did it well.
Yeah.
And we know we did it well because we won. If we'd have done it badly, we wouldn't have won.
Yeah.
Yes, we weren't prepared for what was coming next, but
But that's not our fault, though, was it?
I blame.
You know what I mean? That wasn't. I wouldn't say we won. I would say we did what we were deployed to do.
All right, I'll rephrase it. We won the ground offensive.
Yeah, I think we were let down massively. Retrospect, after once we were boots on the ground, I think we were then let down massively by the powers that be. That then led to a whole different battle that we all faced.
I mean, the fact of the matter is the Americans hadn't planned for. They wanted a regime change. They didn't plan it. They went, right, gung-ho, in, ground offensive, shit, now what? Because they got rid of all the bath pie, which we should have kept, because they were in charge, and they would have done what we asked them to do. They weren't going to be the enemy. They went, yeah, all right, fine. But we got rid of them all. And then you've got a vacuum there, and then the people that came in filled that vacuum.
That was chaos, yeah.
Were people that were after money. It's all fucking down to money. Everything is down to money, and including what happened to you afterwards with fucking him. You know what I mean? It was like all down to that. And we tried our best, even when we were out there, all the later telex, mistakes were made, unfortunately. And like you said, they are, the analogy of that good orchard, there is still going to be bad apples in that orchard, unfortunately. But that's the same across the spectrum of life. You can't stop people being twats.
And it's circumstances as well, nobody knows, do they, the circumstances that they were in at that time. Everyone has a different way of reacting and dealing with things in that moment.
And then going back later on different, different optalic later on, you said it there earlier when you went across the border and was waving and smiling, happy to see you. I've got video of me driving around Basra and stopping and talking to locals, and they were fucking great. We found an off license, and fucking I probably shouldn't talk about that on the podcast, but we did. We found an off license and may have partaked of buying some product. That was quite good, but then just like there was a paradigm shift of it. Fucking hell, the haters. And the last time I went out there, it was like, fucking hell, what's going on?
The whole infrastructure broke down, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just,
therefore, then you're going to not win the hearts of the people, which is unfortunate.
I mean, we'll move on to you getting your commission. How was that for you? And once you've been commissioned, how different was it for you?
So I went after Iraq, I decided I wanted to stay in, but I didn't want to stay in the military police anymore. So I remember going to the chief clerks and saying, what can I transfer into? And he said, we could come to us. And I remember laughing away, no way. And I actually thought about it. I thought, you know what, why not? And so I went to Winchester to do like the basic sort of clerking, but I was a sergeant at the time. That was tough in a way, dealing with like people. I was joining them in their sort of their phase 2 training type thing. And then fast forward, I finished that and went.
I mean, I'll just interrupt you there because that's something else we've got in common. All right. When I left Junior Leaders Regiment, I was on the first All Arms Clerks course, Winchester.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go.
And I went to a regiment as a clerk and then realised I was shit at it and I got sacked and I ended up on the guns.
Well, I realised how important good admin is, when you've been on deployments. And I was lucky that I went to 2 Engineer Regiment. And I was a chief clerk there in one of the squadrons. And because I'd got all the other courses as well, the regiment leaned on me to do training and things like that. And I was written up by Colonel Urch, now I think General Urch, I think he might have left now, as his number 1 sergeant. And I remember him saying to me, you should go for your late entry commission. And I went, I can't do that. And he's like, and the adjutant spoke and he said, I think you should. And they invested their time in that. I remember speaking to the REO and he's like, don't be stupid. You've only just transferred to the SPS and you'll never get it. And I thought, well, I'll go anyway. Everyone was saying I should, but the actual SBS guys were like, no, you shouldn't because it'll not happen. And I studied and I did essay writing and, command tasks and dealing with, just what you would get on what would be classed as a 3-day event, which is the selection process. And I went for it and I was lucky enough to be accepted. And I remember I had an 8-week wait, and I remember Sergeant Major saying to me, whatever you do today, don't cry, but I'm here if you need me. And I went, right, am I going to go wait outside the boss's office then? And he's like, no, you can go do battle PT. So I was like, right, fine. So we went battle PT. I remember running up is it Purnham Down, Tidworth. And I was thinking, there's loads of people today. There's more than the norm. And the QMSI was on as well. I was like, this is a bit odd. And he's like, Webster, get down, do some press ups. And just generally, they all knew that I was proper, like chin strapped and fed up because I wanted to know. And it was pushing my focus was on whether I'd got a commission because there was a lot riding on it. And then I get round the corner and all the guys are on the squadrons on parade and they've got all the mess silver out. And then Sergeant Major's like, don't cry. And then the CO comes out and he says, don't be too sad, lads. Sergeant Webster will be leaving us. She's got a commission.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Yeah. I bet you felt over the moon.
Oh, it was amazing that they went to that effort,
Yeah.
And it was funny because all the way through at the very beginning of my career wanting to be an engineer. And then, there was an amazing regiment, work hard, party hard, And I remember, I think, going into the mess that afternoon or that midday and not leaving till about 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's what, that's how it was, wasn't it? Back then you were able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so that going from sergeant to an LE, I mean, I was artillery and that didn't happen. It was not
well, yeah, I mean, I think because I wouldn't say I career found myself by transferring to the SBS. So actually I would have caught up because most people on my 3-day event were peer group, there were warrant officers and stuff. It's just, I suppose, I'd let myself career wise down in certain aspects for being maybe too vocal. in the military police at the time. And yeah, I think it caused up a few ruffles when they found out that I'd actually got my commission, because I think everyone thought that I'd regret transferring, and actually it worked out to be the best thing ever, really, because we all sit on the sidelines and go, if I was this, I could do this and I could do that. And I thought, well, if I can become an officer, I can hopefully make a difference,
Yeah.
to the and that was my main thought process on it. And then I was lucky enough to go, once I got my commission, and went off and did my REO's course. Oh, my deck commander's course first. Went to 4 Army Air Corps as a deck commander, and then got on my REO's course. And I remember saying, what I wanted to do was serve an infantry battalion, because I thought that would be the hardest thing to do. They need really good admin when they're deploying, and I wanted to go with a battalion that was about to deploy to Afghan, or as it was then, because I thought I could give the most from my experiences, from an admin perspective.
Yeah.
And I went to the Rifles, and I still consider myself a rifleman to this day. So I went to One Rifles, a lot of hard work. We get it wrong sometimes. I was hard on my team at some point. I just wanted to strive for perfection, because I suppose when you deploy, you want to make sure that if something does happen, that everything is sorted, from the next of kin to the insurance to the last letters to everything. And I had a great team, and we did that honourably.
I mean, we don't give it a thought, really. I mean, like I was telling you before we started, my last 6 years in the army was working in RHQ. I started off behind the desk, got sacked from it, and ended up behind the desk again. And I worked quite closely with the likes of the deck commander and the RAO. And I don't think the lads on the ground know how much they do. Some don't, but the ones I worked with did. There was the amount of stuff that goes on in the background. And if things fuck up, like when JPA come in and fucking all that,
that was hard,
all that
but
good
it's good
stuff. I think it was just lack of knowledge of people, because it was a brand new system in that. I don't know how I got involved in it. I ended up in Glasgow putting PIDs in. How's that happened? I'm not in the AGC. Leave me alone.
It's an RCMO responsibility, that PIDs.
Yeah. I was in a few PIDs. I used to move myself around in subunits, especially when I knew there was duties coming. I'm not with you anymore. No, but that was fun. I've heard stories about, basically not regiments, soldiers being created. I've heard them.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about that afterwards. It was quite. When I was up with Glasgow and I found that out, I was like, really? But yeah, I mean, being out, the point I'm trying to make is that when you're out on a tour like that, things are going to happen. All right. And I think the longer we've been in Afghan, the better we were at it, as a whole, the army as a whole, injured, getting them back to Birmingham, the deceased, the repatriations and stuff like that. It was like clockwork, and that was only probably because of the amount of it that had happened. But it was like people in the background.
It was crucial administration.
Making sure this was bang on. And I have never, ever, in my 27 years in the army, would I knock the compassionate side. The other case, I've seen people. I was out in Bosnia, and one of the lads, his father was dying. The fucking helicopter landed where we were at, asked for him. We were like, what's going on here? He waddled off, come back, picked his bag up, and he was gone. And he took a split, flown to Bryce Norton. There was a police car waiting from Bryce Norton and took him all the way up to Newcastle. And he got to see his dad before his dad passed away. So I think that side of the military is very good. But when they get it wrong, they get it wrong. But I've never seen it there.
Yeah,
when it happens.
When I arrived, the like, I think the battalion had something like 70 to 80% of its passports were out of date. Next of kin was wrong, all that sort of stuff. And when you're going on a deployment, they'd obviously had a really rough deployment to Herrick previously and lost a lot of riflemen, and they were injured. So I think there was a lot of expectation and worry about our deployment, and rightly so. So it was trying to have that balance with the companies, the sergeant majors, the OCs, and then obviously, you're butting heads with the ops because they want to focus on ops. And I'm like, well, hang on, if you don't give me the time, don't hold it against my team when something goes wrong, because we will not be accountable. And I did used to try and instill into the guys, like when one of the riflemen would come into the office, just stop what you're doing, it doesn't matter, because we were rolling out JPA at that time, so they were still not self-service 100%. But that means that they're coming into the office because they want to do something, and they might not come back again. So it was, we got there. I had a great REOW, I had a great team, and we worked well with rear parties. So if something did happen, we had that mechanism in place to support the aftermath, or the fallout.
Yeah.
And equally, I think it was helpful for me as a female, and I've been a bit older, when I was at Camp Bastion and we would get the riflemen who had been involved in an incident. They would come and decompress maybe for a few hours at our camp before they would go back out again, and to just sit there and have a chat with some of them. And it was, for me as an older person, with all the deployments I've seen, and done, to see these young lads who I'd known and had the banter with before we deployed, to now see them battle weary and their eyes tired. It was very, very hard. And it was a hard tour, but we got through it. And then not long after that, my return from that, obviously I missed out the Kenya bit, but then I left in the 2013.
So was that used your time up, or
Yeah, it was my time up. I'd done the short service commission because I'd commissioned as a sergeant.
Yeah.
I did 24, so I would have got out at 22, but I did 24. So, and I was at that age, I was like, well, still young enough to think of a new career.
How did you find the transition in the civistry then?
I suppose I consider myself quite lucky. I'd decided where I wanted to work, which was in Canary Wharf. I'd been there doing a fundraising event with the riflemen before we deployed. And I was like, wow, all these women dressed up, handbags, high heels, and all that sort of stuff. And I thought it was such an, vibrant place, full of energy. And I went and did my resettlement, CIPD, and did project management. And then I remember one of the officers of the Rifles was leaving around the same time as me, and he said, "Oh, I'm going on a insight day to Barclays. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Oh, right, I'll register." So we went to Barclays, and that's obviously when I first met Stuart Tootle, who is still very much sort of a mentor, sponsor in my life to this date. And I listened to him, and he was talking about the after program, what he'd put together, which was basically the Armed Forces Transitional Employment Resettlement Program, which was probably one of the first programs that had a reach for the wounded and sick element, because we were getting obviously quite a lot of the guys who were at Headley Court on rehab, amputees, blah blah blah, PTSD, going through all sorts of stuff. And Stuart's idea was to get these, whilst they were recovering, into a work placement, and it was amazing, so successful. And I went to that Insight Day, listened to him, got speaking to a few of the colleagues from Barclays there that were helping do the after program from the side of the desk. And I spoke to this lovely lady called Tessa, who's still very much part of my life, and she rang me up a few weeks after meeting me and said, "Look, we've got a year-long contract. Don't know whether it will become permanent or not, but it will give you an opportunity to come and work in Barclays and support the after program. And I was like, wow, yeah, absolutely. And my job was basically to go round Barclays in head office in Canary Wharf and get MDs and senior stakeholders to buy into the after program in order for people to come in and do work placements.
Yeah.
And then I would then work with CCP to get advertisements for guys and girls to come in onto work placements. And it was really successful. I remember one of my key things was, been back as an origin as a soldier, was I didn't want it to be officer centric, which a lot of these work placements at that point were with JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley. We were all mainly focused at officers. And so I, tried to do the polar opposite, and I would have lance corporals to colonels on the same work placement. I think the best one I had was I had a guy from Veterans Aid, the homeless charity that Hugh Milroy is the CEO of. I had one of the guys there that was going through the process of getting back on his feet. He came on a work placement, and nobody would have known any more different. And he actually told the course at the end that he was currently a homeless veteran. So it was an amazing opportunity. And then I got offered a full-time job, but as a business manager in wealth within Barclays, and I stayed there for 10 years. I still had touch points with the after program and supporting charities like the Soldiers Charity. We ran a skydive every year with the Red Devils, and we raised over around £250,000 throughout that 8 years.
That's a good amount, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because if you had 25 to 30 colleagues doing it and they raised a minimum of 1,000, Barclays would match 1,000, so we would get 60,000 in one day, basically.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a good thing. And then COVID happened, and then that stopped, and then things changed, and I was unfortunate. I got made redundant in the 2022, yeah.
Yeah.
And decided then to step back into the security world.
Bit of a change from the banking then. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I suppose project management, business management, but I thought going back into the security world and leaning on my close protection course that I'd done all those years ago, and thought, well, it would give me an opportunity to have a better work-life balance, but obviously it doesn't sometimes. Yeah, that happened, and I suppose we need to rewind slightly to go back to why we're here.
Yeah, I mean, so you left the army 2013, and I know something happened in 2014.
So yeah, I'd been out of the army then for nearly 6 months, and I just finished a transition partnership event, I think, and I was sat with a colleague in the back of this taxi, and my work mobile went and said, are you Rachel Webster? And I was like, yes. Oh, I am. Still remember his name. I won't say it. I'm from IAT. Obviously, I'd been watching the news about IAT, as we all had. It was quite a hard watch during that period. We also had a high level of suicides, and there was all sorts going on. And this investigation just seemed to be like this witch hunt that we were all listening to. And you mentioned Phil Shiner at the beginning, and it was all just seemed a bit murky. And so, yeah, I said, yeah, I am. I was aware of what IAT was. And he said, we would like you to come and give a statement about an ex-colleague. And I was like, well, no, I have got nothing to say about him. I wasn't in any locations in Iraq where at the time. I've got nothing of an evidential nature to say. What is it you want me to tell you? And at that point he just said, look, we can force you. And I said, well, if you can force me, then we'll go via a lawyer, because like I say, I've got nothing to tell you. And that unsettled me a little bit. It made me think about Iraq again, about the things that I'd done whilst I was out there, all the good things that I'd done, you know. We haven't had time to talk about a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
We should have done this as a two-parter. And, you know, I'd renovated a school whilst I was out in Iraq. And, you know, I'd tried to leave something good wherever I've deployed. And it unsettled me. And I remember at that time I was dealing with some senior generals within Barclays, as in helping forge the resettlement process and saying what could be better.
Yeah.
And I remember having this conversation with one of the senior generals, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "No, not actually." I said, "This has happened." He said, "Well, they shouldn't be doing that. I'll speak to the head of IAT for you." I was like, "Well, fine." But I said, it was the lens of not me, others, you know. I said, like, if I feel so bad and I haven't actually done anything, you know, what are others going to be feeling if they're getting similar calls, you know, and being accused of doing things or being on the periphery of somebody who's been accused of doing things? I said, it's not a great place to be or to feel. And he's like, "Yeah, I get your point." And that was that. That was the October. And like I say, it unsettled me, felt uncomfortable for a few weeks, felt like, it's just a bit off. Anyway, come January the 10th, I was about to get up for a run, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I just heard this massive bang on the door, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" Startled, thought it was a bin or something, and I remember being on the top, grabbed my dressing gown. I was like, "Who is it?" It's like Navy police. Well, my heart like pounded then because I thought, "Oh God, one of the," because as you know, in the military, you're dealing with people from dysfunctional backgrounds, all sorts of backgrounds, and some of the riflemen had me down as like, executor of the will and things, and I thought, "Oh hell, something's happened to someone."
Yeah.
And I remember running down the stairs, and I was like, "Who is it again?" And said, "Oh, Navy police, open the door." So I opened the door ajar, and as where my front door was, there was a side door then that went into the lounge. And literally, as I opened the door, I was just pushed into the lounge area by 5, 6 men, mixture of Navy uniforms and what I will call as, if you're old enough to remember, Burnside, that character, call him Burnside, long trench coat type, and he was leading the conversation. Bear in mind, I know that none of these have got right
I was
of
going to
arrest
say
on me.
that's
So they've got no right of arrest on me, I am
Yeah.
a civilian. These are Navy police. And I remember, saying, "We're arresting you for misconduct in public office." And I'm like, "What?" Anyway, it's too long to talk about now. The detail of the conversation, don't really want to say, but it was, flash to bang. It was horrible. I panicked. I'm like, "You can't do this to me. I want a policeman here." And this guy was just beyond arrogant. He was like, "You're not getting one." I mean, "What do you mean I'm not getting one? I'm entitled to a policeman. You have got no right to arrest me." "Yes, we have." I was like, "Well, show me your arrest warrant. You'll see that when we take you where we're taking you." "Well, where are you taking me?" It was like all this cloak and dagger. "Well, you'll find out when we get there." I'm like, "Look, I'm not going anywhere." And I remember making a run for the stairs, and one of the guys grabbing me, and I got away from him, and he just got into my bedroom, and he just launched on me, put my arms behind my back, handcuffs on. I'm screaming with pain now. I'm like, I'd never been handcuffed before. And I'm like, "Let go of me. Oh, are you going to behave yourself, are you?" That sort of it was just this horrible mockery, I'm like, "Please let go of me." At this point, my dressing gown's undone, and I'm like, just humiliating. Bear in mind, I hadn't been to the toilet, brushed my teeth, or anything. And I went, "Yes, I'll behave," and I'm like, when I even recall it back now, it makes me shudder just how I was. And they left, and these two young girls are in my bedroom now, and I had to get undressed in front of them to get dressed. And then I needed the toilet, and I keep the door of the bathroom open, to force the door of the bathroom open while I went for a wee, like, and it was just vile. And I remember crying, going down the stairs, and I'm like, where are you taking me? You find out when you get there. And then all these blue lights were on outside, neighbours were out, and they put me in the back of this van and shut the door, and I just was in shock, duress. And I thought, what's gone on? What's happened to me? And then I'm thinking, who's lied about me? Because I'd never ever done anything. I think when I pride myself on the deployments, as I said, even in Kosovo, dealing with those young girls who've been raped, dealing with the elderly ladies in Bosnia, the orphanages. It's not like I'm saying I'm like some saint or anything. Everybody did some amazing things out there, but I tried to leave it better, like hearts and minds, and just been a kind human, So to have this on me, I was like, what? I just couldn't process it. And I remember sitting there, and I got not angry, but I was sitting there thinking, whatever's happened, truth will come out. I haven't done anything, and that was me playing that back in my mind. But also at that same time, I was thinking of all those lads that had been accused of not looking after Iraqis properly, from not giving them food, water, allowing them to go to the toilet. These lies that had been spanned by Phil Shiner, putting their names into a public domain where they had no evidence to suggest that they'd done any of that. And I was like that was like, I was thinking, they're doing this to me. They're doing exactly to me what I'd been reading about in the newspapers and on the TV, where, all these shocking stories that soldiers had done this and that, and you knew in your heart that nobody would have done that. Or if somebody had, somebody would have gone, you can't do that, and that would have been shut down straight away. And I remember I asked the woman who was driving, I said, I think it was a man and woman, or girl, whoever had watched me get dressed. I was in the back of this, the van, and I'm like, please, can I go to the toilet? She would radio through, and I heard the Burnside, no, she can wait. I want some water. No, she can wait. I remember doing that every sort of 30 minutes. And we're going over Tower Bridge now. I'm like, where are they taking me? I'd heard that some people had been taken to Paddington police station, so I thought, well, they'll take me there. And then I'm like, no, they're not taking me there. And then they're getting further and further out of London. And I'm like, now I really need the toilet, and I need a drink. And I'm like, I'd say I brush my teeth or nothing. And it sounds it sounds minor, but at that moment, you feel like your whole of your human rights has been taken away from you.
Well, they had.
Yeah, in theory. And I remember arriving at the Navy, as I now know it, the detention centre in Portsmouth, and there was this big old custody sergeant major who was waiting outside, and a door came open, and I looked like somebody off Jeremy Kyle, hair was everywhere, like eyes were all puffy. I was in a my joggy suit, all tears and stain, and I was like, and he's like, you want to go to the toilet, don't you? I went, yes, please, now. And I ran to the toilet, and then I remember then going into this holding cell, and there must have been around 15 men in there now, because there was the custody team, the arresting team, and then there was more Burnsides. And I'm like that. And I remember like, what on earth is going on? What, it felt like I was a murderer or something. And I remember Burnside says, get her in the cell. And I remember looking at all these guys, and I said, any one of you now touch me, I'll have your pensions. I said, because what they've done to me today is illegal. And they all stood firm. None of them moved. And the sergeant major then just said, everybody get out. And he sat me down. He said, look, I smoked at that point. He said, do you smoke? I said, yeah. I said, well, I'll get you in the exercise yard, whatever you've done. I said, I haven't done anything. And he's like, I know I didn't want to process you, but I was told to process you, you know, because I was illegal. I should not have been processed in a Navy detention centre. Shouldn't have been held there.
No.
You know, I was a civilian, you know, and he said, we'll look after you. And, you know, I was only in my cell maybe a few hours, but I was there for 14 hours in total. I remember at that point as well, Burnside tapping me on my shoulder, and I looked up at him and he went, you want a duty officer, dear? Duty solicitor, dear? And I went, yeah, just want to get this over with. I remember saying it like that. And then he tapped me again. He went, it's just process. And he winked and walked off. And I thought that fueled my belly then. I was like, I don't want a duty solicitor. And I remember ex-RMP, SIB guy had become a lawyer and he was down in Salisbury. So I got his number and he came down and was my assistant, my solicitor.
Yeah.
And basically said, you know, it's a ruse, it's illegal. I had a no comment interview. And then was released 14 hours later with no money, no nothing. And literally, he had to lend me money to get the train back to London. And I stopped at a friend's actually that night, and then went back down to London the day after. And that was the first time I ever rang up. I remember ringing up. I think it was combat stress that next day because I thought I'm done. I don't know what's happening. I'm done. I can't cope. And I got an automated number and then something else. And I thought, this is just ridiculous. There was no one to talk to. No one knew, you know, there was no one, I just didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
And I just masked it all. And literally, I didn't tell anybody for 6 months I'd been arrested because everybody that I told retrospectively would be like, well, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And it took them a year to admit unlawful arrest and detention, and a further year to say that there would be no more no more recourse on me or whatever. And it was at that point that the papers got hold of my story in the 2016, and that's when I had a meltdown. Then when it went public, I didn't know how to cope with it all.
So, I mean, it dragged it all up again when it hit public. Yeah, so all the feelings you'd had back then would be intensified.
After the arrest, I couldn't sleep properly. Didn't go to bed for probably 6 months. I would sleep on the sofa. Drank heavily. Put a lot of weight on. Didn't feel like I had a purpose. Just felt betrayed. And had nowhere to go. And then obviously I read some articles, linked in with Johnny Mercer. A lot of my case was used on the IAT inquiry about what they shouldn't have done. They even, you know, although Sir Michael Fallon says, I cannot confirm or deny, they activated what was called RIPPER on me. Now, RIPPER is for terrorists or, you know, murderers, and that surveillance was done on me, you know, to find me where I was in Canary Wharf. So nobody knew where I lived in Canary Wharf. So, you know, it was the most, you know, I still to this day can't comprehend whoever thought it was a good idea. Oh, I know. Let's go and, you know, my name was I was an associate of somebody in a file, and thought, oh, I know, let's go rumble her, shall we? Let's go knock on her door. She might just tell us something. Even if I had any information, which I didn't, it would have been hearsay. You know, even if I said, oh, he's a bad character, he's a bad un, what would that have proved? You know, so it just was the most. I mean, now I look back and go, you know, it still bothers me. It still bothers me. But more so now, you know, where we get to in this lawfare piece, you know, I'm trying to be a voice of good. You know, we could, but yeah, it took its toll on me. It took its toll on my career at Barclays, probably. I felt I wasn't confident to go for promotion. You know, who knows what path my career would have taken if I'd not. You know, luckily I was part of Barclays Healthcare,
So when it went into the papers, I was able to go and seek help. I didn't have to go through this waiting list and these endless filling out forms and all the other stuff that was associated with trying to get any mental health support. And then I decided to be a voice, and I went on to Good Morning Britain, and I spoke about what had gone on with me. I went on there with my barrister at the time, and it mainly was to try to sort of say, as what I talked about earlier, you can't. What you did to me was wrong. You wanted to get out of bad apple. You thought by knocking me down, you could get to that person. And that's not the way you go about doing business. None of us want anyone to walk away who's done wrongdoing. We're all very proud veterans and proud of our service. And if somebody has done something wrong, whether they're in uniform or not, then of course they should be dealt with appropriately and follow a process. But don't come at people, and don't come at them again and again and again. It's wrong, and there's, it's killing people, literally. And there was that spike of suicides around the time of the height of the IAT investigations, and I still believe to this day that some of those guys who received a knock then checked out. And can I prove that? Not right now, but the data will be there somehow. If IAT released the people that they spoke to on certain dates and knocked on, and then you get a list of the individuals that have checked out along that period, that's the most shocking evidence that we could produce. So where I'm at now is, I put an article out on LinkedIn, I think on the anniversary of my anniversary of my arrest. And I think it was the first year that I felt good, and I hadn't sat there, reflecting on what had happened, because I had to work on myself to get better. I lost a lot of friends during that time. I wasn't a nice person during probably the height of my sort of trauma. And, it still had effect on me at other stages in my life. At the end of the day, the menopause triggers trauma. I went through that. In hindsight now, when I look at it, I was perimenopausal when they came through my door. It's amazing that they actually made it out alive, if I'm honest. For any men who are out there who are listening, probably knows the wrath of a menopausal woman can be quite severe.
Yes.
But in joking aside, that in itself does cause trauma.
Yeah.
And I really had to strip everything back to get better. So I hit rock bottom. I was on, Xanax and drinking and smoking and having a really unhealthy lifestyle, relationship-wise, and all that. And I realised if you don't stop, you're not going to be well, and what does that mean? It could go on either way. And I stripped everything back and just literally detoxed my life, everything, stopped. I just went cold turkey on everything. And it took me about 3 months to get to a point where, I can see a little bit of the old Rachel again. But it changed me significantly. I think as a result of that, now I have a lot more empathy. I've always had empathy, but I'm a lot more considered in with how and what I'm doing, and wanting to help people. And so going back, I put a post on LinkedIn on the 10th of January to say, right, on reflection, this is what's happened to me 10 years ago. I want to see this I want to try and be a force of good now. And if anybody is out there that has suffered with lawfare, any form of knock, you know, whether that's a knock because you were a witness or a knock because you were being investigated, then, you know, let's try and gather a strong community together. And at the same time, I didn't realise then the aftermath of that post. It did go pretty much viral, and I got a lot of connections from it. People were messaging me saying, you know, something happened to me 20 years ago, something happened to me 30 years ago. And then you realise, you know, it's not just about Iraq, it's not just about Afghanistan, not in Northern Ireland, and even the Falklands, you know, it's just, you know, it's so vast, the people that have been affected by prolonged investigations, some of them unnecessarily.
I would say a lot
And
of them unnecessarily.
a lot, you know, we all know that investigations have to go through a process.
Yeah.
But it's like as if no checks and balances were done and no lessons learned have been done. And, you know, as a result of finding out the Prime Minister, for example, had done pro bono work for Phil Shiner, that hurts.
Yeah.
You know, that it, you know, regardless of the fact of his position and that it was pro bono. You know, I tried to get a solicitor to do pro bono work for me, to do litigation against the MOD for my moral injury. I couldn't get anyone, you know, and you think there he is giving his time for free. But aside from that, I think it's time now as a community of veterans to come together who have been affected by lawfare. You know, pretty much similar to what the post office went through. You know, we are seen as a dirty secret, and we shouldn't be. You know, I know some people can't come out at the moment and speak about it. You know, they're from the SF community or they're going through it with the Northern Ireland piece. But some of us can stand shoulder to shoulder and say, that affected my life. The moral injury you get this as a result of that arrest has caused my career, my personal life, my health to be affected by this investigation. And it's not just me, it's there's hundreds of me out there that are sat with no voice currently because they don't know where to go or they're ashamed of what's happened. You know, whether they were accused of something or not, it doesn't matter. That prolonged investigation has had a significant impact on their health, their welfare, their well-being. And, you know, for me, as I say, I feel like we are this dirty secret. There's no charity that's putting their arms around us. I do have to correct that, actually. Hugh Milroy from Veterans Aid, when he saw me on the TV last week, as a result of, you know, coming out about what had happened to me as a result of Phil Shiner and the pro bono work aligned to the Prime Minister, he got in touch with me and kindly offered me to speak to a counsellor. And I didn't realise, I was like, no, I'm fine, Hugh, you know, people need it more than I do. And he went, no, I'd like you to. And actually, you know, I've now got 50, you know, getting some sessions with a very, very, you know, a very kind counsellor just to check in with myself, you know, because you don't realise that you need to carry on checking in with yourself.
I want to jump in. There's something you said that kind of made me think. So you're right. There's people out there who have kept quiet about it. Probably haven't even told their closest friends. And I think you hit the nail on the head because there's no one to talk to. You know, and you're right. Build a community, get people involved in it, get it out there so people know. You know, and then they can get. You know, they can get in touch. It's all right. Me, you know, somebody ringing me up and saying, "No, I went through this. You know, I was arrested and through the IAT. I've got no experience of it. So all you'd be doing is would be just belt feeding. You know, you'd just be talking to me. But having someone else to have a back and, you know, forward to it, it'd help immensely.
Yeah, and I am trying to build that community. I need to find, and I have spoken to like Whistleblowers UK have kindly offered like a platform where we could probably register names and people can come forward and tell their story, because it's important, and it's also very important that we gather some information that crosses over all of the investigations, so we can then use that and then go to, Parliament, wherever.
I mean, it's
and ask and get, a lessons learned activity going on. We also need to have a real deep dive into the Armed Forces Covenant. I mean, that is not fit for purpose anymore.
No.
I read the Armed Forces Bill the other week when all this was happening, and there is nothing in there about people who have been subjected to lawfare. No support, nothing. There's obviously there's some great headways into people who've been affected by crime and victims and all that sort of stuff. But what about people who have been put under an investigation, like I was for nearly 2 years? Where's my somebody who I can ring and go, like an aid memoir, right? If you are subjected to an investigation when you leave the military, this is what you need to do. You need, so example, when that guy came in my house, I can go, actually, you need to ring this guy, so there's some process in place, because as it stands at the moment, I knew, by listening to me, that I didn't have to go anywhere with them. They had no they had no right to take me out of my home.
I mean, it was assault.
Well, it's not even assault. I mean, it was kidnap, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
I think that was that. I think that was the Daily Telegraph had that was their line, which was kidnapped by the state. That should not be allowed.
No,
that should not be allowed.
You would expect it wouldn't be allowed in modern society.
Exactly.
You'd expect that in like South America or wherever, Africa or bloody hell, people trying to throw stigmas around the world, but this is Great Britain. This is the United Kingdom.
Unfortunately, it's still. I mean, we're talking when mine happened, 2014. It's still happening today.
And it's not. It doesn't hit the news.
And it's not hitting the news because those people can't say anything. What's going on?
Right.
It's wrong, and it needs to stop. And if it doesn't stop, they're going to have more and more people who are going to check out because they cannot cope with the aftermath of what's gone on. And like what we've said before, with like, for example, Kosovo, sometimes we talked about, you can be put back into that place, that moment in time, that smell puts you back there.
Yeah.
Was similar to this lawfare. I remember when it came on the telly 2 weeks ago now. I was there again, being taken out of my home. And you saw before we started this podcast, there was a knock on the door.
Yeah.
And I got all panicky because it was like, it's late. I still have that anxiety of, who is it? I'm like shouting downstairs, who is it? Before I even get to the door. But I'm like already on edge. And I've said it before, but out of 24 years service, I'd done over 11 years deployed from Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, as we talked about. How many more knocks will I get?
Yeah.
During my life? We now know that the Northern Ireland immunity bill has gone through, it's been signed, and that's going to open up to 800 odd cases. I was in, Armagh, Auchnacoy, Coal Island, who knows what I've been on the periphery of, who again is my name on a statement somewhere or in a notebook somewhere, that I'm going to get another knock about stuff I did in Northern Ireland.
I mean, it's
the conversations that I had with people in Auchnacoy, who you just don't know what is being said and done, and why are they treating people like this? So I think my call to action is, I want to find a secure platform where we can hold a network, a community together, anonymous, or, you know, or not. You know, they don't have to come forward. They can just speak if they want. That would be, if they want to do that. I want people to know that we're no longer a dirty secret. You know, we can be our own community, our own tribe, and you know, and we're stronger together. And if we can get that bit first done, we can then lobby to Parliament. You know, we can make change happen. We can insist on lawfare being included in the Armed Forces Covenant, or scrap the Armed Forces Covenant altogether, and do a veterans charter that can't be messed around with, no matter what political party's in place. You know, and Hugh Milroy has done some amazing work on that. You should get Hugh on your podcast. You know, he has done a great article about that in you know, a veterans charter to supersede the Armed Forces Covenant, where, you know, it would be in it would be in law, you know, and to include lawfare, to give that support. As we say, none of us are above the law.
No.
What we want to do is be treated fairly, appropriately, in line with the law. And when you do get that knock on the door, you as a veteran or a serving person knows that you have a you know, the right protocols are in place.
The right protocols and backup.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, who can get
Like an
that.
assisting officer. So if, for example, you did get a knock tonight, you know that you can call X, who's going to be your support officer throughout that investigation.
You know, I think something like this would take a hell of a long time to set up, but I think you're right, it's needed. And as for the Armed Forces Covenant, yeah, don't get me on that one. But I mean, I listened to something the other week on another podcast, and they said this, like, I can't remember word for word, but when he said it, I was like, yeah, that's right, that. So you get all these companies who sign up for the Armed Forces Covenant, right? And there's lots of them, right? And it's fucking great because they get to put a badge on the website. It doesn't mean shit in the end, really. It's just so that it's a bit of self-virtue for their company.
I do think there's a lot of good companies out there who
Don't get me wrong, there is, but there's also a lot of people who do that.
Yeah, maybe. But, you know, for me, it's about us as veterans, as a community, coming together and helping shape what that should now look like. It shouldn't be the politicians and the you know, the veteran minister or whoever shaping this. They should have, you know,
they should be coming to us.
They should have people like us,
adding
value to what, you know, making change. And we should, like you say, we're stronger together. And I think it's time now for people not to just accept these investigations any longer. And I think that's a problem, because we're all military people. We're all used to obeying orders and just doing what's right. Oh, you know, you're arrested. Oh, okay. Follow me. Oh, okay. Well, no, it's not right, and it's not happening. And we should now start. You know, I sound quite militant. I don't mean to be, but we should we should now. You know, I think this is the time. You know, we haven't got a better, you know, a better time to do action now with everything what's gone on in the press recently. You know, what really got my goat is, you know, you had the Prime Minister and the whoever else, you know, standing there grandstanding about how amazing the troops are, which we know we are, after Trump's gaffe. But 2 days later, there they all are, you know, there he is, you know, throwing us under the bus with his pro bono work. So, you know, how duplicitous is that? And equally, you know, not having the confidence in the Veterans Office to do right by us. You know, if you're going to abstain from a vote, a crucial vote, then you don't even deserve to be in there, because that's not showing leadership at all. You know, you vote, what if you're told to do a 3-line whip, you know, and I know that, you know, I know the politics of it all, you know, I'm telling you, you need to vote this way. Well, if you if you're in that position and your main task is to look after the veterans' interests, why on earth would you abstain or vote for a bill that is going to cause more lawfare investigations from Northern Ireland veterans? Why would you do that?
You mean, see, one thing I've noticed over the years is really veterans can be, they can just ignore shit like this because they'll think, well, I never did that wrong. Doesn't affect me. I don't have to worry about it. But you've proven that it fucking can happen to anyone.
Can happen to anyone.
Yeah. And you're right. It's fucking more people will, as you put it, check out due to this.
I think we talked about it before we signed. To end on a positive note, I guess. I've recently come across a guy called Josh Parrish, who's a US veteran, and he set up Vet Life, and he set up I think it's called Battle Buddy app, because again, I'm sure you've seen, we've got all these new initiatives that have been rolled out, and the government saying, oh, we're spending 40, 70 million on veterans and stuff, more shiny initiatives that actually don't get to the person who really needs it, right? Because they're a hard community to find. People, who've gone through the lawfare investigations are hidden away, they don't want to come out, they're embarrassed, their lives have been in turmoil, they're probably, are just wanting just to function. And then you've got, the guys who are struggling, homelessness, drug addiction, coming out of prison, I would say, that veteran, that non-functioning, dare I say, I don't mean that in a bad way, community that is so hard to reach. And all these initiatives and all this stuff is like, well, the functioning veteran like me and you see it all, on social media and everything else, but it's like, we just scroll by it because we don't need it. So it never actually gets to the core. And then you've got like these small charities like the Block, which does amazing work up in Liverpool. A small charity that countless times I see the updates from them where they've been helping veterans who have literally on their ass, and they've gone through all these other charities before they've actually ended up right at the Block.
Oh, I totally agree. The small charities out there are fantastic.
And they're doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
You've got that passion, and I'm not saying, I just think that we've just lost sight of how you reach the community that you need to reach. And so I was looking at what Josh Parrish has been doing with Vet Life and this Battle Buddy, and amazing. Like this Battle Buddy is like this little app that all the lads, regardless, have got the phones, haven't they? An app you download straight away, and it literally says, do you need to speak to somebody? Yes, no. You press yes, and you're on the line to a counsellor somewhere, and that could be a front of house app to all these other initiatives like what Combat Stress do and all the others and Samaritans. But it means that if you are there currently sat at home, not feeling great, feeling, who am I going to talk to? What's the point of me ringing up to say the Samaritans, they aren't going to understand what I've gone through. I've gone through lawfare, I've gone through this investigation, I've gone through that. I don't know where to turn to. And you can go straight onto one of these, like an app, and have immediate engagement, because that's what they've been looking at. How do you engage with veterans of today that because the ones that need it most are on your TikToks and your, I don't know, all this other stuff, your Instagrams and everywhere else, all these other apps. But that's where they need to get to. They need to be on that, to reach out to these guys, because then they don't know who to contact when they're really on when they really need it. Anyway, sorry, sidetrack slightly.
No, that's fine. Well, we've come up to 2 hours.
Oh my God.
I bet you weren't expecting that, were you?
Bloody hell. I bet people won't be listening to it for 2 hours, that for certain.
Well, that's their fault and their loss, right? If that's the case. And, I won't say stuff them because I don't want to say that to my listeners.
Well, I
But
wish I'd been a little bit more structured in my delivery, but it all went a little bit everywhere, and yeah.
it's
But
absolutely fine.
we got to the main bit at the end, which is, we need to stop lawfare, really.
Yeah, we do.
And there's some great initiatives going out there already, and people doing their campaigning. And I hope that once that's been done, we can join this all up and make people accountable for it.
I mean, I've got a few names written down here, and I'm going to reach out to them, to either get them on or see if there's anything I can help with. Because you never know, there might be just the littlest thing. That type of thing. Right, I'm going to call it a night now. It's been fantastic. I've absolutely loved it.
Really?
And I honestly, I didn't expect it to last 2 hours. I really didn't. But it has. And honestly, I've enjoyed it, but I don't want to take any more of your night up. No. I'll wish you luck for the future, and with the job that you're doing now, and with bringing this. Hopefully, we could have a British.
Let's keep punching the.
We could end up with
getting the lawfare out there. Yeah,
a British battle buddy app. You never.
I'd love that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
We can look into that. We can see what.
Maybe there's somebody listening who might be an app specialist that might be able to help us. But I definitely think that there is something that's needed to reach those guys that need it most, and stop these shiny initiatives that actually are just money spinning, useless things that don't make no difference. May as well just give all the money to these charities and let the charities run things, rather than these, like, I don't know what it's called, what they've got, the next one's running Op Valor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever that's going to do.
There should be a permanent like veterans office, not just like switches via government. It should be, that's it there. Almost like fucking civil servant.
I know we're finishing now, but yes, I believe that Veterans Office should be ran. I know it's got veterans in it who are ministers, but should not be ministerial. It should be ran by veterans for veterans, with no political party alignment, so that everything that comes out their office is in the benefit of the veteran community, and not because of the current government. And that is circling back to what Hugh Milroy is talking about with the Veterans Charter as one of the first things. We get a Veterans Charter embedded into legislation. Then we have a veteran office for veterans with no MP's involvement at all. That's what,
I agree. That's exactly what we need. Really is. Right, I'm going to stop the recording now. Again, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed it, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you.
And I hope you've enjoyed this as well.
Yeah, well, once my book comes out with Stuart Tootle, we'll come back on.
Yeah, too right. Right.
It's Forged in Steel, about my journey from steelworks to from.
You see, you've gone 2 hours and you haven't even mentioned that bit.
I know. I didn't want it to be about me. Well,
But it is about you. It's your podcast. It's not about me, is it? Right, come on then, Boo, quickly.
So actually, I started it. A dear friend of mine passed away last year, and she became an author at 70, and she was just an inspiration to me. And we would sit there and talk about what had gone on. And she said, Rachel, maybe your book would help people going through trauma, and recovering from with resilience and all that sort of stuff. And especially, the touch point for me starting my life as a welder, challenging there, been a young woman, all the places where I've been in the world, coming out, and then obviously the devastation of being arrested and how that affected my life, and then the positives of that arrest and how my life then changed, and the struggles I had, and then ends with wanting to do good and challenge lawfare.
And when will that be published?
Well, we haven't found a publisher yet.
but Stuart
So-
is co-writing it for me.
Yeah, self-publish it.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's gone to an agent. It's drafted. So yeah, forged in steel.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Reach out to Damian Lewis. You never know. Not the actor, the author. you never know. Right, I'm going to stop the recording now. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully it'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.